Salam, Habibis. This is Frank with the Iron Age News, South Florida conservative news site, Thursday, October 2:30 update. There is peace in the Middle East, kind of, and what people should be saying instead of it was brokered by Joe Biden, and that the Jews are going to do something wrong should be what will the Arab world do next? And we here at the channel have been talking about this for some time. There's been other videos talking about what will occur organically in some of these places. And we are now going to give you some forecasting as to some of the bigger players in the Arab world and what could possibly happen next. Donald Trump has left a lot of responsibility for the failure or success of these peace agreements and peace in the region in general to the Arab world, which is as it should be since they live there. The the peace accords occurred in Egypt. The Turkish are involved in being on the ground, placing their military. Saudi Arabia, of course. The Qataris, of course. The Emiratis, of course. These are all players. If you look at the peace agreement photograph, you see a lot of Arab outfits in there, which you wouldn't have seen a couple of generations ago, even in the last couple of administrations ago, to show the involvement of this real coalition to get this stuff out of the way. And it occurs because if you go to southfloridaconservative.com, we discuss the time periods of the Arab world since its introduction to us, meaning oil, from the oil time, from the beginning of oil to the middle of oil till now. I think you'll see three distinct time differences. The middle period being when, for whatever reason, they decided to get involved in terrorism, and now realizing the terrorism is not going to be what they need to continue as the countries they are, because Muslim Brotherhood, which is in Egypt at the moment and everywhere else in the world at the moment, will depose each and every one of these royal families and bring them under the rule of theocracy. That has been the problem people don't realize is these countries want these idiots gone as much as we do. It really threatens their way of life before it threatens ours. Okay. They all have to go. The only one that's allowed to stay is Iran, because that's run by theoretically a religious person. Okay. The Saudi, all of them are run by emirs or sheikhs or kings or princes. They all have to go. So let's talk a little bit about what's going to go on or what can go on. We can't say what is going to go on because who the hell knows, right? It is a windy curvy trail to get you through the Arab world. So we're going to go to the heart of this whole Middle Eastern thing, which is not the battlefields or the oil rigs, but the boardrooms, the palace councils of the big three in my mind and in the rest of our minds: Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, which is a conglomeration of a few little countries in there, even though Sheikh Mohammed usually speaks for most of them, and the Kingdom of Jordan. Actually, fun fact, Jordan's the only one who's related to Muhammad, right? The Hashemite kingdom. He is a male heir to the family, and yet they hate him, right? So that should tell you something right there. So together, these countries form what we're going to call the Westernized Arab Coalition. They don't like that term, but I'm going to use it anyway. Their rulers have walked a tightrope for decades, balancing the tradition and modernization, the faith and the realpolitik, and the West and their own survival. But as the global order fractures and the West itself has lost moral confidence, and we see what's going on in the world, these states are redefining what it means to be Arab, Islamic, and modern all at once. Little I for Islam, by the way. To understand where they're headed, we need to rewind a bit, as I said, before the oil, before the skyscrapers, before the human toilets, all that stuff, before sovereign wealth funds. Arabia was a web of tribes and trade routes. Power came from lineage, religion, and survival. Didn't come from bureaucracies or budgets. Then they got oil, you know. In the 20th century, oil turned the sand into sovereignty. Now it was a big deal. We call this the rentier state, okay? A system where rulers don't tax their people, but buy their loyalty. The deal was simple. We provide work and or money, and you will shut up. For decades, that bargain worked. The West got its energy and stability. The monarchies got protection, Russian models, whatever it is they wanted, they got it. But oil wealth also bred complacency and dependency from a group of people who were, I don't know what we can even say about the old days, but under the surface, there was always something growing, and that was these Islamist movements, the Wahhabism, stuff like that, and of course, the Muslim Brotherhood. At first, they were social, schools, charities, moral revival. They were sort of lost in all this oil money, and they felt rudderless, I'm assuming. And if somebody got a feeling of good old-timey religion, but unlike snake handlers that we would have had, they ended up with bomb throwers, for lack of a better term. So over time, these groups became political, then they became militant. As we said, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Al-Qaeda, ISIS, each was both a religious rebellion against Western dominance and a threat to the Arab rulers themselves. The irony, of course, is that certain family members in each of these organizations was giving money to these idiots, right? And sometimes even the people who are now in control also gave them money. The irony, you know, is of course not just that, but some of these regimes that once nurtured the very ideology that would later try to burn them down. Bombs still go off in these countries. People are still shot over Islam and over why the king or the emir or the pasha or whoever hasn't stepped down and embraced the faith. So fast forward to the 21st century, the oil era is no longer eternal, okay? Global economy is shifting, climate policy is biting. So the Gulf rulers are rewriting their social contracts. In Saudi Arabia, it's called Vision 2030, 2030, Vision 2030. It's a top-down revolution in everything from tourism and technology to women's participation and entertainment. This is headed up by Mohammed bin Salman, who will become the king of Saudi Arabia if and when his father ever dies. In the UAE, the model for this is post-ideological capitalism. Glitzy, global, aggressively pragmatic. That's Sheikh Mohammed. And in Jordan, which is the king of Jordan, oh God, what is his name? And he's a nice guy. In Jordan, they're less rich, more vulnerable, vicious intelligence forces. The army's pretty on the game. The challenge is simply surviving because it sits right next to all the troublesome people, right? Job stability and keeping the peace. King Hussein was the other one. And keeping the peace between competing powers, all right? Now you overlay all this with geopolitics. Since the Cold War, these monarchies relied on a U.S. security umbrella. But the American commitment is no longer unconditional. Probably going back to World Trade Center, right? But the American commitment, again, is no longer unconditional, meaning stop blowing shit up in the United States. You guys have gotten away with too much. The Trump years in particular recast the relationship as transactional. You want bombs, you want guns, you want whatever, you want access, you want a seat at the peace table, you have to deliver the results. You can get the terrorists on the phone, you can get whoever else on the phone, you are going to do these things, or we are going to leave you to the devices of your own creation. And that's how we got the Abraham Accords. The UAE and Bahrain normalized ties with Israel. Jordan stayed cautious. They have to. Saudi Arabia stayed conditional. They had to. Saying no Palestinian state, no full normalization. So still Washington's message was clear. It's your region now. Stabilize it, invest in it, and own it. And the caveat that we don't talk about is or we'll let the Israelis do it and we'll make sure you can't say a thing about it. That was a heavy stimulus, let me tell you. You go look at some of the pictures of some of the areas that the Israelis have managed to motivate, and you will understand why these other countries are particularly terrified of that little country, because they are. So where does this leave the so-called westernized Arab coalition? It is at a crossroads of three competing pressures. We like the number three here. Modernization versus control. How do you liberalize an economy without liberalizing politics? Number two, Islamic legitimacy versus global branding. How to open society while maintaining cultural and religious authority, but not the level of religious authority that the madmen want. You can have and have had in the past various kingdoms that have had Islam in them. We cannot have various kingdoms that have Islam in them supplying terrorists with bombs all across the rest of the planet. Those days are over. Wabbit season has to open soon. Okay? And number three, the Western alignment versus strategic autonomy. How are you going to hedge between Washington, Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran without getting crushed in the middle? So they have to play a long game. They're experimenting with what we would call controlled openness, which is introducing entrepreneurship, tourism, and even limited debate, but we're going to stay out of their politics. That was the problem that flipped them out throughout the Obama era, throughout the Biden administration, and throughout Clinton, was our need to infect them with the DEI shit. Turn them against us very rapidly. It was easy to do. All you had to do is say everybody has to be gay in Saudi Arabia, and that was enough to stop the whole thing, right? Even if they are, they're deeply in the closet, and we're not going to talk about it. So hands off their politics, hands off nation building, because we see what nation building's done for the Iraqis and for the Afghans, right? So Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman is presenting himself as a reformer, and in a way he is. He's a very smart cookie. He is going to modernize Islam, which means, hopefully what I think it means, he's going to get rid of the moral police. He's going to open cinemas. He's going to host music festivals. He's going to let the women show their ankles once a month. It's going to be crazy time in Saudi Arabia because nobody wants to put money into a country full of fetishistic cavemen, right? And they are going to need outside investment, regardless of what they say. Mohammed bin Salman is also going to push more for the sovereign wealth fund. He knows at some point oil could become irrelevant, and then he's really screwed. So he has to have other things going on. Good for him. Same with Sheikh Mohammed in UAE. Good for him. It's about time somebody had a thought other than where to get more hookers, right? So the UAE positions, as I said, is going to be as a mediator. They're facilitating these prisoner swaps between Russia and Ukraine. They're investing billions of dollars in Africa, legally and illegally. And then Jordan acts as a diplomatic bridge. It's small, but it's incredibly efficient. It is indispensable on a lot of issues. They manage the refugee problem very well. Their intelligence operation is first rate, and they have moral weight in the Palestinian cause because they have so many Palestinian camps in their own country still for decades, right? But the path forward isn't guaranteed. There are real risks. You could have a global oil downturn. Iran could decide to get into a regional war with somebody other than the Israelis, because why wouldn't it, right? Or another wave of extremism with the attendant assaults and assassinations could send the reform agendas into reverse. Social expectations, especially among the young, are rising faster than these governments can safely meet them. And too little reform, and they lose relevance. Too much reform, and they lose control. So the forecast for this is most likely going to become a managed modernization strategy that keeps the form of the monarchy, but upgrades its software. You're going to have more technocrats. They have to diminish the role of the clerics in cabinet in general. Investment conferences are going to be out there instead of these sermons. Social openness becomes the new legitimacy. They have to address the unemployment issue because that's where they're getting all the religious crazies are from, the guys that are part of the permanent underclass, the same way the Islamics are getting all of the converts in the United States is from the permanent underclass. Not the ones they brought in, but the ones that they're getting here through the prison system and everything else. All right. And I'm not talking about the Nation of Islam with Farrakhan. I'm talking about the real bomb throwers. Okay. These states don't want to become a democracy, and we are not going to push them to it if we're smart. All right. But they are going to become more durable. It has to be more of a England, except the Queen's in charge, not the Queen now, Charles, but the mother. If they can deliver prosperity without any chaos, they might just prove that in a modern Middle East, all right, stability, not ideology, is the highest form of power. So for the West, the message is going to be equally clear. Partnership with these regimes now runs through mutual interest, not a moral lecture. We're not there to civilize the savages. Most of the savages have gone to Oxford or Harvard, and we have to try to, I guess, de-brainwash them from that shit, right? So there's no more talking down to them. The question for Washington and Europe isn't whether to trust them, it's whether they can afford not to. I would say Washington at this time period will go more of a distance to do that than the Europeans. France is still kicking around in Africa trying to get those ex-Francophone countries to kiss their shoes and miss colonialism, right? England is busy becoming Pakistan, so they have no real time. Germany, they have Turkey. What are you going to do? So as long as they move in this direction, we're looking at some really good possibilities for peace in the long time. These other guys, like I said, if you have guys that are haters, your mindless haters usually come from total illiteracy, idiotic backgrounds, totally underemployed or never to be employed people. There's three or four things that they usually go to get these guys, right? Picture your mother send you to blow up at a United States Marine Corps checkpoint, knowing that your death will result in her getting a refrigerator. All right. Think about that. Now think about it where you've got her the refrigerator so you don't have to go blow yourself up. Would you go blow yourself up anyway? Probably not. The psychological pressure upon the average Arab male, unemployed, illiterate Arab male, is fairly high because of the family structure. It's been used against them for years. Not saying they couldn't get out of it, but it's too easy to fall into this martyrdom shit because it's almost like the honor killing stuff, right? We've done it. It's over. Everybody in the neighborhood loves us. So if we can get them out of that, which is what the heads of these countries are trying to do, and employed and working and doing whatever they have to do to behave themselves, then the sheikh can stay the sheikh, and the king can stay the king, and the emir can stay the emir. And they can learn to do it all within the context of that, much like I said, Britain under the other queens. So that's all we have for you on this. We aren't going to get extremely close into any of the particulars of this until we see what Abraham Accords actually starts up with and continues to move forward through. At that point, you'll really start to see how the cards are being dealt. All right. But it will probably be along these lines with who's going to be the facilitator. It used to be the idea was Israel, Saudi, were going to be, I'm sorry, Saudi was going to be more of the money. Israel and Emirates, most of it was going to be done in Emirates with Israeli technology. And then Israel and Jordan were going to run the security side of it. And then all the other little Arab countries that could get in, except for Iran and Yemen and whoever else was pissing everybody off at the time. Nobody's going to get a piece of this Abraham Accord money if they are supporting militant Islam. And people have to understand, first of all, fuck everybody who's stupid about this Qatari airfield because you're stupid. You're a stupid baby. Read up on what it is. We've been doing it with the Germans in Texas forever. We did it with a couple of other countries too. It's a good deal. It makes us the money. It allows us to see what's going on. The country just has a shit group of people to run their military. You know, it's dumb. I understand the Qatari is still involved in spending money on terrorism, but at some point you have to realize since they have no real military, they are open to being extorted by the terrorists that they themselves built. You get it? You have to get them to turn the page on that. These guys have billions of dollars. You've seen the articles with Yasser Arafat's daughter's worth what, $6 billion? $6 billion. She stole all that money that should have gone into the Palestinians. Like I said, and Trump has said, Palestine would be a beautiful waterfront property if it weren't for the fucking Palestinians. So that's what we've got. Have a good day. Any questions, comments, send it to us. Like and subscribe, I guess. I'll be happier if you would like and subscribe to southfloridaconservative.com because that's where we have all the paperwork and you can have it sent to you as a newsletter and it will save us from having to do the videos. All right. Have a good day once again, and I will see you later.